I think one of the great things about crypto is that the user feedback cycle is so fast, like compared to some of like traditional like manufactured consumer product stuff that I've worked in the past. Like that cycle of figuring out like is this thing I'm making actually are people going to like it can be pretty long, and you can invest a lot of time in things that end up not working out so well. I think in crypto, a real benefit is that you get instant feedback a lot of the time about whether something is helpful or not to what a user wants to do.
Welcome to today's episode. In today's episode, we interview Nathan from Orca. In this episode, we talk about Orca and the Solana DeFi ecosystem. Welcome to Trailblazers. Today I'm here with Nathan from Orca. Nathan, can you start by telling us who you are and kind of how you got to work in crypto and at Orca?
Sure. Yeah. So my name's Nathan. My background professionally is I started out as a securities attorney and practiced law for a little while, but actually spent most of my career working in operations for manufacturing businesses. So a lot of um, different things, like kind of overseeing factory production, lots of travel, which kind of leads to how I got into crypto. Because then, like when COVID happened, obviously a lot of things got shut down. There was not nearly as much travel at all, so a lot of extra time that I didn't used to have. Kind of started getting into crypto and Solana in particular. So got very into Solana. Very into Solana NFTs to start with, like back in, I guess it was like August or September of like 21. So I think like my first NFT mint was Solamanders, if people remember Solamanders, and then I had some other ones that went a little bit better than that in the end, but met a lot of interesting people along the way for sure as well. And so I guess about a year later into that, I had enough where I decided something I wanted to do and was like interested in the industry. And Orca had always been a place that, or a protocol that I had been interested in. I had used the product, and when a position opened up, I decided I'd apply and take a chance, and ended up working out and have been there for about a year, a little over a year and a half now.
Oh, that's awesome. I feel like most people who use Solana know what Orca is, but can you give a little overview about what Orca is and kind of what you guys do there?
Sure. Yeah, Orca is an AMM platform, so an automated market maker where people can create pools and provide liquidity. Orca is exclusively focused on concentrated liquidity. So all of our pools are concentrated liquidity, which means that you don't just provide two tokens in like an equal value amount and put them into a pool. You can do that, but you can also select the price ranges that you want to provide for. It could be any range, either both sides of the token. You could even provide a range of like only one token that's like above or below the current price. So a bit more. It's kind of like in between an order book and a traditional AMM in terms of how you can use it and its flexibility.
Yeah, totally. So, how do you guys kind of think about attracting liquidity to Orca, given that like most swaps by like retail users are executed through Jupiter?
Sure. Yeah. So I think since there definitely has been a trend towards most things going through an aggregator, I think obviously the platform that has the best pricing is going to win execution for those trades. And so I think a lot of that comes down to just having the feature set for liquidity providers that they care about, that makes it best for them to provide liquidity the way they want to, in a format that's easiest for them. And so they're most comfortable providing depth, and kind of like I mentioned with how you can set different price ranges. It turns out that matters a lot, not just how much liquidity is there, but like how concentrated it is around the current price and how active people are at moving that liquidity around, and making sure that the effective depth when somebody puts a trade through Jupiter is enough that they win that trade, or at least a part of that trade, as they're often like split up across various platforms. So I think for us, attracting liquidity is very much about building out feature sets that are helpful for liquidity providers themselves, and then the different strategies they employ. Because I think like one misconception is that or that sometimes a misconception is that all liquidity providers are trying to do the same thing, that they all have the same strategy in mind, or that they're trying to mimic like what you would traditionally see in like a high frequency trading environment for like a traditional market maker. And most of the time, that's often not true, that that's not exactly what they're trying to do. And so giving them the tools to kind of execute those objectives that they do have, whatever they may be, I think is like really important. Um, I think in terms of like other incentives to attract liquidity, at least for us, we found that like token emissions can be useful for sure, especially for new pools or things where you're trying to bootstrap something from like 0 to 1 in a sense. But usually that's the extent to which we would use like a token incentive or something like that. We've I think over the past couple of months, our emissions are near zero on Orca tokens and for Orca tokens, and usually viewed as trying to build sustainable liquidity through the feature set that enables LPs to make good choices and kind of act on their insights, their own market insights, makes things sustainable that way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When you're looking at like liquidity providers using your platform, do you see a lot of people kind of setting and forgetting liquidity, or do you see like a lot of active management with like small, concentrated like price targets when they do it?
Sure. Yeah, I think I'd say it really runs the whole spectrum. So you have positions that have been like active and forgotten about basically since 2021 to some degree. There's not that many of those, but like they do exist where people have deposited and forgotten about it entirely for like years. The vast majority of liquidity is not like that. Is much more active. I think you see a big range from everything from that to people who are managing liquidity on a block by block basis to where so like every 400 milliseconds they're updating their range um, to like fit the exact spread that they want, to fit the exact positions that they want, like on in the pool that they want. Also moving between fee tiers to kind of adjust for volatility. So moving things very dynamically, very actively managed, almost like you would see on an order book. But and most of that liquidity is definitely managed programmatically. They're not using like the UI and submitting new things every block, of course. But I think there's a lot in between, like the by number, like if you look not by value of liquidity provided, but by number of users. Like most people are in between those two things, right? And so they're adjusting things on average every couple of days. Is pretty common. So like they have a view on how price is going to move. They set a position based on that view, and then adjust it like every. I'd say like between like 12 hours to a week is like most position length things will fall in there in general.
Yeah, that's kind of to be expected. The larger people are definitely moving their money a lot more. How have you like kind of seen the difference in how people have been using Orca and I guess the overall Solana DeFi like between like the past kind of bull run in 2021 and kind of the current bull run that's maybe started around like October?
Sure. Yeah, I think one big difference for sure, especially for dexes, has been kind of like the emergence of meme coins, and the kind of the dominance they've had. So we've definitely had like meme coin seasons in the past, I would say, but really nothing close to the scale that we've seen, like starting late last year. So I think that's been a very big difference. I think um, it also like has a big um, like you're asking like how different people use liquidity. I think like meme coins use liquidity very differently as well. Like in general, they're using like full range positions, more like much more like a constant product AMM would be, where you have an equal value of both sides of the pool, and don't really actively manage it. You can just kind of set it and forget it. And a lot of that is protocol owned. So I think like one thing that has been a lot different for us is that um, we don't have a as I mentioned earlier, we're focused exclusively on concentrated liquidity. So we don't have a constant product pool offering anymore. And so I think that like one thing that we've seen that has really affected the market a lot is that there's a lot of things about that more like the more simple nature of a constant product pool is attractive to a lot of people and has a lot of has some benefits in terms of like ease of understanding, but also an ease of composability. And so I think that's definitely had a big impact on Orca's usage as well. So I think we can using concentrated liquidity, you can really approximate everything that you can do on a constant product AMM as well, but it's not as intuitive, right? And so I think there's like some definitely things that we've been working on to kind of bridge that gap to make it easier for people to interact with a concentrated liquidity product in a more intuitive way that will enable people to kind of get some of those same benefits of simplicity out of it that they're used to on constant product platforms.
What sort of things have you been thinking about in that area? Or you guys been thinking about in that area?
Sure. Yeah. So I think there's like a couple of different dimensions for sure. So I think like one is just simplifying some of the UI flows so that there's not so much complexity and so many decisions you're kind of forcing on people that aren't really necessary for all applications. Making that part of it easier. So some of that will be rolling out in the next like couple of weeks, I'd say, and give users kind of a more streamlined experience that don't want to use some of the more advanced feature sets of that Clam can offer. I think there's other stuff on the technical side that are differences between how like a concentrated liquidity product works and a constant product AMM works. One big one being how like tick arrays work, and so tick arrays are kind of um, something that exists on chain where like the liquidity is kind of, you can think of it as kind of like buckets where like liquidity lives within different price ranges. And so for these different tick arrays, you need to pay rent for to the network for to use them basically. And so we're looking at some different ways to handle how tick arrays are activated because with highly volatile tokens like a meme coin, where the price might very might shift very dramatically in a short period of time. It has historically created some issues on occasion with how those tick arrays get activated and filled, and how it affects trading. And so, doing some work behind the scenes to kind of fix some of those problems, so that from the user's point of view, like the user shouldn't have to know what a tick array is, right? The user shouldn't have to know what any of that stuff is. It should just work like they expect it to work. And so doing some work kind of at the smart contract level to address some of those things as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. What are like some of the bigger lessons that you and the team have learned while working on Orca?
I guess like maybe one that kind of relates to like the meme coin stuff we just talked about is that like it's hard to predict exactly what the market is going to do or like what types of assets are going to be popular, and it's important to be willing to react to what users want and to respond to the feedback and kind of shift your offerings to meet those needs. So I think that that's for sure something that is important to not get overconfident in where you think the market might be headed or like what direction you think things might go, because I think one of the great things about crypto is that the user feedback cycle is so fast, like compared to some of like traditional like manufactured consumer product stuff that I've worked in the past. Like that cycle of figuring out like is this thing I'm making actually are people going to like it can be pretty long, and you can invest a lot of time in things that end up not working out so well. I think in crypto, a real benefit is that you get instant feedback a lot of the time about whether something is helpful or not to what a user wants to do. And so, I think the most important thing is just making sure that when you hear those things a user wants, to build them, like help a user achieve what their objectives are. For sure, is like the top priority.
Yeah, you're getting feedback within 2 minutes on Twitter compared to a
Exactly.
long
Yeah.
life cycle.
Yeah.
Um, So, how do you guys think of like staying competitive on in the Solana liquidity scene, given that there's like a lot of new dexes and the dexes use very different methods to provide liquidity, and there'll probably be plenty of more different methods in the future. So, how do you guys think of staying competitive for liquidity on Solana?
Sure. Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to the idea of providing giving liquidity providers the best tools that you can to help them express their market views. So I think uh, there's a really broad array of like types of tokens. The way in like different, I would say different like categories of tokens, and for many of them, how people provide liquidity or how they think about providing liquidity is pretty different. So for like stable swaps between say USDC and USDT, it looks a little bit different even than how people approach like Sol versus Jito Sol or Sol versus M Sol or whatever other LST people may be using. And so I think like that's different, which is very different than like a major token like Sol against USDC, which trades differently than like a project token like Orca against USDC, which is very different than like a meme coin. Like there's like a pretty big spectrum of different like types of tokens. I think and the way liquidity providers approach all of them is pretty different, and also the types of people who provide liquidity for these different tokens is quite different as well. And so, like a token pair like Sol USDC, you'll have like a lot of very sophisticated users providing liquidity programmatically, whether it's on Orca, whether it's on an order book like Phoenix or OpenBook or another AMM platform, or something like Affinity that's Oracle driven. I think there's like a lot of different ways that people provide liquidity, and it depends on the type of token. And I think for Orca, we see the concentrated liquidity primitive as something that's very flexible to be able to be used in a lot of different ways by different user types across a lot of different categories of tokens. And so trying to take a kind of a holistic approach like that to make sure that not only does the core primitive address those different markets and different needs, but also that the UI itself we build out tools that are tailored to each of those different segments because they don't all need the exact same thing, even if they're all trading on Orca, for example. If they're all providing liquidity on Orca, they may not all want the exact same interface, right? Just like we learned, the people launching meme coins don't really need all of like the intricacies of a concentrated liquidity position structure. Like they need something else, right? And same people providing liquidity programmatically, they may not really even be using the UI. They need more SDK tools, different things to help them interact and like express their view as best that way. So I think like that's our view. Sure, is that the like we you brought up earlier, the flow is going to go where the best execution, and so it's our job to give our users the best possible to express their views as accurately as possible, so that they have a higher likelihood of winning those trades.
Totally makes sense. Can
Okay.
you talk a little bit about what you think about kind of the points meta on Solana with a lot of the new projects offering points, and like how, as a protocol who has a token out already and has been going for like a whole cycle, I don't know, kind of your perspective on that and maybe the challenges uh, with that.
Sure. I mean, I think it's definitely a different position to be in, like when a token is already released, than kind of when you're in the run up to a token release. But I think in general, the like points in general, I think are just like a tool to attract users, right? To try your platform. And at the end of the day, like I think just like crypto in general, like is like a new form of technology. Points are like a sort of it's like an iteration on some of that, and you can use it like in a way that's very positive for users or not. And I think we've seen like examples. I haven't seen any. I haven't talked to anybody within Solana DeFi who I think has purposely employed points in any sort of like with any ill intent. I guess I want to be clear. Like I'm not trying to say anybody's anything bad. I think we have seen some examples of that in other um, other arenas. I think outside of Solana, for sure. Uh, I think at the end of the day, though, like regardless of whether somebody uses a point system or not, what points get you is an opportunity for users to try your platform, right? And so, if people have a good product and they're able to use points to have people try that product and people like it, I think that is like perfectly reasonable, right? And I think if they really like the product and it's of value to them, then they'll continue using it like after the points stop, right? And so I think for us, like it doesn't really change our like core outlook in terms of how we approach things because over the long run, people are going to use platforms that are useful to them, and so if somebody is driving usage to their platform instead of Orca because of points, um, I think over the long run, the real risk to us isn't the existence of points or not. It's whether our product keeping up with the other product, right? Is our product giving users what they need or not, and is the other product doing that better than we are, right? And so I think if it's us, that's the real risk. Like it's always making sure that we have the best product offering for people who want to provide liquidity. And I think like points is like a very powerful like marketing tool to get people in the door. But it's always about making sure that the product offering over the long run is really giving users what they need.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. It's like as long as you guys kind of keep your product up, people just leave the points farming thing in the long run.
Right. And if our product isn't up to speed, like people will leave anyway. Like if there's not points, they'll go somewhere else. So I think it's really on us to make sure that we're keeping things up to date and how users want to use it.
Yeah. So switching topics a little bit. So Orca has this thing called the Orca Climate Fund. Can you kind of talk about like what the Climate Fund is and why Orca decided to create this?
Sure. So the Orca Fund, I think, arose out of kind of the as something that's very important to Orca's founders, Ori and Yutaro, and is now something that is operated completely separately from Orca. So either it's separate from the like Orca's like core contributor team, that's separate from like the governance council that Orca has as well. It has its own group of people who are independently put on the approved to be on um, the Climate Fund Council, and so they use the funds from the Climate Fund to invest in climate oriented startups, and that was not like a directive of how they had to use the funds. That was how they decided was the best way to make an impact on climate, was to try to empower businesses that are trying to scale and make larger impacts that way, as opposed to donations to established nonprofits or something like that. And so I think they just recently published in the last week or so, like their most recent update on the projects that have received money from the Climate Fund so far. So I don't have that list in front of me, but I can find the link for it and share it. I think there's like three or four that they funded recently.
Okay, very cool. Um, so what's kind of on the horizon for you guys at Orca, and like what kind of has you excited about the future of Orca?
Sure. Yeah, um, I think for sure some of those things I mentioned about like kind of making the UI much better experience for people that maybe have a different objective than the traditional user we'd focused on over the past year or so. That was focused more on concentrated liquidity, so more features tailored towards launching constant product style pools. I would say I think another big focus for sure has been improvements to like site performance in general. So I think um, the kind of explosion of meme coins and the number of tokens itself and a pretty big impact on how a lot of our backend was structured, to try and like sort of an effort to promote like decentralization, like at a technical level. A lot of the architecture we had built previously was kind of put some of the it put a lot of things client side for the user, like what in terms of like calculating routes and pools and different things like this to make the system less reliant on servers elsewhere. And so it turns out that having somebody's iPhone calculate millions of routes is not actually um, uh, an efficient way of doing things. And so I think that's one of those things where the kind of unexpected explosion in the number of tokens like kind of had a an impact on how some of those types of things ended up working. And so some of those things are coming out soon as well. So we should see like a pretty dramatic increase in site performance soon, for users on mobile and desktop both. And I think a lot there's a much smoother experience, as well as like an updated UI in general. So I think a lot of stuff like that, and hopefully later in the year some larger scale things that aren't ready to kind of be talked about publicly yet, but will hopefully be exciting for users to check out.
Awesome. I'm excited to hear about them. So, kind of moving a little bit away from Orca and more towards like what you're excited about in crypto, like other than Orca, like what things have you been using or have you been kind of excited about in the crypto space lately?
I think one thing that has been pretty interesting to me lately, is, it may sound kind of boring on the surface, is actually stable coins, and how like I think stable coins can be like a pretty interesting way for a lot of normal people to get into crypto. I think like they solve such an important use case for a lot of people, in terms of um, the ability to like just do things that they, it's kind of goes back to the idea of like helping people do the things that they want to do, right? Like helping a user kind of achieve their own objectives, whatever they may be. And I think for a lot of people, stable coins are like a very interesting product in that sense. Like both like U.S. dollar stable coins, of course, but also I think like non-U.S. dollar stable coins are like an area that's going to grow a lot over the next several years. Um, and just the ways that something like the payment infrastructure that exists is likely to shift, um, I think is really fascinating, and is like a really like big opportunity for people to kind of understand um, like what crypto is and like why it has value without having to convince them of something that's like a little bit more out of their comfort zone, um, like an AMM or a meme coin, or something that may feel a little bit more like esoteric to the normal person. I think like stable coins are very easy to relate to, and for a lot of people, depending where they are, like have a real like clear value proposition compared to their alternatives right now.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. It's a lot easier to convince somebody that USDC could be useful than why Bitcoin is going to go up in price or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, thank you for taking your time and coming on and telling us about Orca.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it, and I apologize for the assault of like Discord messages earlier. You can tell I've
No worries.
like you can tell someone's been in crypto too long, like when they're just like immune to it and like don't even notice that it's happening. So I apologize for
Yeah.
that.